I Redditor.
What's the creepiest thing you've seen in broad daylight?
Suicide at the Hoover Dam. He bounced all the way down.
Hopefully he died on the first bounce, geez.
He did not. He screamed until he hit the retaining wall at the bottom and popped.
The sloping nature of the dam is brutal. I imagine you'd bounce non-fatally in horrific fashion until the one last real big bounce at the bottom. What a terrible way to go, and a terrible thing to witness.
Yeah, it wasn't great to see. There was a small vertical wall at the bottom of the slope, so that's the impact that finished him off.
I was a bridge maintainer and inspector. We were standing underneath the roadway, and I saw a body go flying right by us. His body hit the water, and he was torn into two. I still have nightmares about it because that could have happened to us with one wrong move. We always made sure our safety harnesses were correctly hooked up. In my career, I saw 3 jumpers do this. It would shake me to the core each time, but the one I described was the worst. Just like when the people who were jumping from the World Trade Center on 9/11, the sound of the bodies hitting the ground, I have PTSD from witnessing that. Think it wouldn't affect you? Think again.
Not quite broad daylight, but more like dusk. I look out my front window and see a lump on my lawn that looks out of place. I think, that really looks like a dude in a ghillie suit on my front lawn. I keep staring at it and become more and more convinced it is a dude in a ghillie suit. And I start to freak out a bit and don't know what I am supposed to do in this situation. Like, do I call the cops? Then a bunch of neighborhood kids run up to the lump and the actual, factual, real dude in a ghillie suit gets up. It was an older kid or a dad or something playing hide and seek in a ghillie suit.
The creepiest thing for me was when I was out surfing in Northern California. It's really cold, dark water, and I was out by myself. I was sitting there waiting for a wave, and my leash felt like it was caught up, which it does sometimes. I like to fix it before a wave comes so there's no hindrance when I go to stand up. Well, I pull at it a little, and it feels like seaweed or something's on it. I turn towards the back of my board, and there is something on it, a harbor seal, who's sitting on the back of my board, laying on my leash. Scared the fuck out of me, but me screaming scared the fuck out of him, and it went back into the water and I paddled in. I know it's not the creepiest thing in this thread, but it definitely scared me pretty good.
I work security at a hospital. I really just sit outside of the construction zone where they're doing remodeling and make sure homeless people and teenagers don't get in. But I'm also sat right outside the door they use to take the bodies out. There's just something eerie about how, discreet and impersonal it is. Not that I expect there to be some sort of fanfare when someone dies, but they're just wrapped in quilts or thick blankets, quietly loaded up into an unmarked van, and that's it. It's a major hospital, so there's several bodies wheeled out every day. Worst is when you know it's a child, but I thankfully don't see much of that. They tend to wait until the middle of the night so less people see so they don't upset people. Always just strikes this weird feeling in me when I see them. Edit. I should also say that there is a bit of fanfare if they're an organ donor. The doctors and nurses will line up along the hall when they take them out and have just a little moment of silence, like a way to express their thanks for this person inevitably helping someone else. Very bittersweet.
Hey there, I'm one of those folks that wheels the bodies out and brings them back to the funeral home. While it is pretty routine and seemingly lackluster, especially the minivan, please know that most of us working in the death industry take the utmost care and concern with the people we transport or come into contact with. In fact, I often try to play music on the drive that I think they might like. Anyway, I hope that helps. I'm sorry it's a weird part of life that not many witness, but we appreciate folks like you that are there to make things safer, or at least help direct us when we can't find the freaking dock, LOL.
That actually makes me feel so much better about my dead body. I hope when I die, I get someone like you jamming to music. One of my last rides in a soccer mom MILF mobile.
Here in Germany, the car is almost always a converted Mercedes station wagon. There's even a joke about how, now matter your wealth, the last trip will always be in a Benz.
Those walks are called honor walks. They are truly a humbling and wonderful experience. Staff and family will line the halls. They will sometimes play their favorite music or say a little prayer. Being an organ donor is one of the most selfless things you can do in your dying day. Donors are treated with the utmost respect and care. Even in the OR, they will take a moment of silence and give thanks for the donor and the gift these recipients are going to receive. I have been to many working at an organ procurement organization and cry every single time.
It baffles me that people don't default to this. I remember getting my permit and the DMV person asking if I wanted to be an organ donor, and me looking at my dad and saying, do I? And he basically said it's a personal decision, that he was, but my mom wasn't. He said something along the lines of it freaking some people out. I was like, well, what am I gonna do with them if I'm dead? I'm kind of glad he took me and not my mom. He's super practical, like me, and agreed that we don't need them when we're dead.
I watched a murder of crows follow a Toyota Corolla into a mall parking lot. The car parked, and a greasy-looking middle-aged man got out. He beelined for the mall entrance without once making eye contact with the crows who were now following him. At the last second before entering the mall, he tossed a big handful of peanuts over his shoulder, and the crows went wild. It seemed less like the man was controlling the crows, and more like the crows were controlling him.
Funny enough, crows can both recognize faces and relay information to each other. I wonder if he fed a few crows, and now he's the food guy?
I like to imagine it was something more sinister, like he killed a crow and now he is endlessly hassled by all the crows.
That does happen though. If you do something bad to a crow, they can communicate your description, without the use of language, to a large number of crows who will then know that you are a bad guy and treat you like a threat. If you do something good for a crow, like feed them, they do the same. And now you will find all crows think you are a source of food. My wife feeds peanuts to crows, and they now follow her to the store and work and stuff. She will get out of the car downtown after a 10-minute drive, and boom, a bunch of crows will land near her and hop along next to her begging for some peanuts. They would follow her across the bridge from home.
Was taking the subway one day. A lady was walking around chugging a massive bottle of hot sauce, bloodshot eyes, tears streaming down her face. Of course, she sat next to me on the two-seat bench. At first, she was complimenting my nails, and then she just started staring at me, much too close for comfort. She still had tears down her face, still chugging the hot sauce. I made a comment, asking if it was good or something. She acted like I was crazy for noticing it. This was at least 2 years ago, and I still can't get her face out of my mind. Hope she's doing well.
Got lost driving through Montana and wound up in the middle of nowhere. Saw a small town, maybe like 15 buildings total, and figured I'd ask for directions. As I got closer, I saw that it looked like it was abandoned. Houses all dilapidated and in disrepair, but every house had a shiny new car in front of it. Not sure what it was about, but my girlfriend and I both got real bad vibes from it and just drove right past.
I saw a man speeding around a busy grocery store parking lot, windows rolled down, screaming at the woman who was in the passenger seat. He kept speeding up, braking, and was screaming at her the whole time. I called the cops and watched her do a rolling jump out of the lifted truck, right when the cops pulled into the parking lot.
We used to take an old back road that would take us to town where I lived a while ago. It was a 20-30 minute drive. It was an old stretch of road that was an old, worn road that went through a stretch of trees, a small burst of houses surrounded by farmland and fields. So it was very rural area. There is a train track that cuts through and an unkept road that goes off to the side on the right. One evening we went down the road. There was a car, I want to say an old Honda, I couldn't tell, that was parked off on that little road to the side. I saw them and thought, odd, because the road led to nowhere. It just stopped a few feet away. We came back much later in the day. Night had fallen and the car was still sat there. A few days later, we find that the car had been linked to a murder. Apparently, the car belonged to a woman who had been missing. Her boyfriend beat her and left her in a shallow grave. The car he abandoned and left there while her child was at school. Her name was Nyesha Nelson.
I was like 10 and kept hearing a thumping noise from our garage. Thought it was an animal or something. I found my bio mom covered in blood and convulsing from an OD, and she had fell and cut her stomach open somehow. It was truly like a movie. The light was shining on through the windows, upon the garage door, and illuminating just her. She lived after I took care of her for 4 hours until an ambulance showed up, which is a whole story. She's still a POS, but it was like 9 a.m. Not the way I wanted to start my day. Driving down the 5 in California, I saw a car drift across the center divide. It's a massive highway in the middle of nowhere with a big grass divide, maybe the equivalent of 3 to 4 lanes wide, and directly into a semi-truck, going the other way. I was probably 2-3 cars behind the drifting car. Neither vehicle had hardly any chance to brake. It happened over the course of maybe 2 seconds. It literally exploded into pulverized dust. No flames or fire, just a massive explosion of glass, metal, paint, and, presumably, the occupants. The semi shuddered horribly, but with its massive inertia, it seemed to lose very little forward momentum. Happened so fast we were past it in seconds. The poor person must have fallen asleep at the wheel or something.
I was in the car directly behind a head-on when another car drifted into our lane, both going around 55-60. The guy in front of me got out and walked to the side of the road, but the lady that drifted into our lane didn't get out of her car, so I went over and got in the back seat and held C-spine precautions, and there were pill bottles everywhere. Scary, though.
I was sitting outside having coffee, journaling in a tucked-away spot downtown. Some junkie decided to join near me and proceeded to lift up his pant leg and itch what was essentially his bone. His leg was in total decay. Most of his shin had been rotting away. I looked at him and asked if he wanted me to call an ambulance or get him some care. He met my eyes, kinda groaned, and just stared and itched. I got freaked out and just left. I was like 15. I was a few blocks away from a hospital and clinic, so I figured he wasn't too far from help if he chose it.
This is pretty common. I'm a nurse and have seen lots of rotten body parts, but the worst smell I've ever smelled was a homeless man's feet. We double-bagged his shoes, and the whole thing smelled even after he left.